My name is Lily. I am 28 years old. I live in a small town in California, United States. I work at a small grocery store. I have been married to David for almost 3 years. When I met David, I was very happy. He was kind. He was funny. He made me feel special. He used to call me every day. He brought me flowers. He said nice things to me. I thought he really loved me. We got married 1 year after we met. At the beginning, everything was good. We laughed together. We cooked together. We went to the park on weekends. I felt lucky. I thought, this is love. But now, things are different. David does not smile at me like before. He does not talk to me nicely. His words are cold. Sometimes he is angry for no reason. He tells me I don't do enough. He says I only care about myself. He says I never try hard. I try to stay calm. I listen to him. I want to understand. But every day feels harder. One evening, I came home late from work. There was a lot of traffic. I also stopped to buy fresh bread because I know David likes it. When I walked into the house, I said, "Hi, I brought your favorite bread." He looked at me and said, "Why are you always late? What were you doing?" I said, "There was traffic, and I got this bread for you." He said, "You always have an excuse." I felt sad. I went to the kitchen. I wanted to cry, but I didn't want him to see. I didn't want to fight. At night, I lay in bed and think, what am I doing wrong? I clean the house. I go to work. I cook dinner. I try to be kind. But still, he is not happy. Still, he says bad things to me. Last week, I had a small headache. I sat on the sofa and closed my eyes. When David came home, he looked at me and said, "You're being lazy again." I said, "I have a headache." He didn't care. He just walked away. I felt very tired. Not just my body. My heart was tired too. I used to love reading books in the evening. Now, I don't read anymore. I feel I don't have time. I feel guilty if I sit and do nothing. I always think, will David be angry again? One Sunday morning, the sun was shining. I wanted to go for a walk in the park. I said, "David, the weather is nice. Do you want to go for a walk?" He said, "You never think about me. You always want what you want." I felt confused. I thought I was doing something nice. I sat at the table and drank my tea. I didn't say anything else. The walk didn't happen. I feel like I am walking on eggshells. Every day I wait to see what David will say. Will he be angry? Will he complain? Will I make a mistake again? One time, I bought a small candle from the market. It smelled like vanilla. I liked it. When David saw it, he said, "Why do you waste money on useless things?" I didn't say anything. I just said, "Sorry." I say sorry all the time now. Sometimes I look in the mirror. I don't see the same person. I look tired. I look sad. My eyes don't shine like before. I miss the old Lily. The Lily who liked to dance in the kitchen. The Lily who sang while cleaning. The Lily who laughed with friends. Now, I don't feel like myself. My friend Karen at work asked me last week, "Lily, are you okay?" I smiled and said, "Yes, just tired." But I was not okay. I didn't know how to tell her. I didn't know how to explain. That night, David and I had another fight. He said I didn't clean the house well. He said I forgot to wash one of his shirts. I said, "I will do it now." He said, "You always say that. You never do anything right." I felt tears in my eyes, but I didn't cry in front of him. I walked into the bedroom and sat on the bed. I was quiet. My hands were shaking. I told myself, "You are trying, Lily. You are doing your best." But it didn't feel like enough. Some nights, I can't sleep. I keep thinking about my life. I ask myself, is this how marriage is supposed to be? I don't know. I don't have children. I wanted children one day, but now I think, is this the life I want for my kids? I don't want them to see me like this. I don't want them to think this is love. I have dreams. I wanted to open a small coffee shop one day. I wanted to learn how to bake. I wanted to teach children how to paint. But now those dreams feel far away. I don't think about them much anymore. One evening, I was sitting outside. The sky was orange. The air felt cool. My neighbor, Mrs. Miller, came outside to water her flowers. She smiled at me and said, "Lovely evening, isn't it?" I smiled back and said, "Yes, it is." She looked at me and said, "You look a little down today." I said, "I'm just tired." She said, "If you ever want to talk, I'm right here." I felt like crying, but I just smiled and said, "Thank you." Later that night, I cooked dinner. David said, "This food tastes different. Did you do something wrong?" I said, "No, I made it the same way." He didn't say anything else. He just walked to the living room. I stayed in the kitchen and looked at my plate. I wasn't hungry anymore. That night, I sat on the bed and looked out the window. The stars were out. I thought, what happened to us? Why do I feel like I am never good enough? I didn't have the answer, but in that moment, I started to think, maybe it's not all my fault. Before I share the rest of my story, I want to ask you something. Where are you listening from? It gives me strength to know someone is hearing my words, someone who understands me. Please tell me in the comments. I would really love to know. Days went by, but nothing changed. David was still the same. He was still cold. He was still angry. I still felt like I was not enough. I woke up early every day. I made breakfast. I went to work. I came home. I cleaned the house. I cooked dinner. And still, David found something to complain about. One morning, I woke up feeling sick. My head hurt. My stomach felt strange. I wanted to stay home and rest. I told David, "I don't feel well today. I think I need to rest." He looked at me and said, "You're just lazy. You always want to take a break." I felt my eyes fill with tears. I didn't answer him. I just got dressed and went to work. At work, my friend Karen looked at me and said, "Lily, are you okay? You look tired." I said, "I'm just not feeling well." She said, "Maybe you should go home and rest." But I didn't. I stayed because I didn't want to hear David's voice in my head. I didn't want to feel guilty. That evening, I came home and started cooking dinner. I didn't sit down. I didn't rest. I just cooked and cleaned. When David came home, he looked at the food and said, "Again? We had this last week." I said, "I'm sorry. I thought you liked it." He didn't answer. He just sat and ate in silence. I ate quietly too. I didn't feel hungry. I just moved the food on my plate. I felt like I wanted to cry, but I held it inside. After dinner, I washed the dishes. Then I went to the bedroom. I sat on the bed. I looked at the floor. I asked myself, what did I do wrong? Why is he always unhappy with me? That night I cried quietly. I didn't make any sound. I didn't want David to hear me. The next morning I told myself, I will not cry today. I will be strong. But at work, I felt weak. I forgot to scan a customer's item. My manager said, "Lily, please be careful." I said, "Sorry." I felt small again. After work, I went to the coffee shop near the bus stop. I used to love sitting there and reading. I bought a coffee and sat by the window. I looked at the people walking outside. Some people were laughing. Some were with family. Some were alone. But they looked calm. I thought, I used to be happy like that. I sat for a long time. I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to see David's face. I didn't want to hear more bad words. But the sun started to go down, so I left. When I got home, David said, "Where were you? Why are you late again?" I said, "I just stopped for coffee." He said, "You waste time and money." I didn't answer. I walked into the kitchen and made dinner. Later that night, I sat outside. The stars were shining. It was quiet. I thought about my life. I thought about my dreams. I used to dream of opening a coffee shop. I used to draw pictures and paint. I loved writing stories. But now, I don't do any of that. I don't even smile much. I asked myself, am I the problem? Am I really selfish? Do I care only about myself? But deep down, I knew I tried. I tried every day. I cooked. I cleaned. I worked. I listened. I said sorry all the time. But it never made him happy. The next morning, David went to work early. I stayed at home because it was my day off. I cleaned the house. I washed the clothes. I watered the plants. Then I sat down with a cup of tea. For the first time in a long time, I felt peaceful. Just a little. I picked up a book. It was an old book I used to love. I started reading. I smiled. I didn't know I missed reading so much. That afternoon, I went to the park alone. I sat on a bench and watched the ducks near the pond. There were children playing. Some people were walking their dogs. The sun was warm. The wind was soft. I closed my eyes and said, "Thank you, God, for this moment." I stayed there for an hour. Then I went home. David came back later. He saw me reading a book. He said, "What are you doing? You have time to sit and read?" I said, "Yes, I cleaned everything. It's my day off." He said, "You should do more." I looked at him and said nothing. But inside, something felt different. I was not angry. I was not scared. I was just tired. That night I thought more. I asked myself, why do I always try to make him happy? Why do I never think about my own happiness? I remembered something Karen once said to me, "Lily, you matter too." I closed my eyes and whispered, "I matter too." The next day, I went to work. After work, I didn't go straight home. I met Karen at the park. We sat on the grass. We talked. I didn't tell her everything, but I said a little. I said, "Sometimes I feel like I am not good enough." Karen looked at me and said, "You are more than enough." I smiled. I wanted to cry, but this time it was not because I was sad. It was because someone saw me. Someone cared. That evening when I got home, David asked, "Where were you?" I said, "I met Karen." He said, "You didn't ask me first." I said, "I don't need to ask for everything." He looked at me. He didn't like that. But I didn't feel scared. I felt calm. Later, I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired, but my eyes had something new. A small light. A small strength. Maybe I was not the problem. Maybe the problem was how I forgot to care about myself. And maybe, just maybe, that was starting to change. One morning, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself. I had not done this for a long time. My hair was a little messy and my eyes looked tired. But I also saw something else. I saw a woman who was still here. A woman who did not give up. A woman who was trying. I remembered all the days I felt small. I remembered all the nights I cried quietly in my room. I remembered all the times David told me I was not enough. But now I was starting to see the truth. Maybe the problem was not me. I still cooked. I still cleaned. I still worked every day. But I stopped trying to please David all the time. I started doing small things for myself. I went for walks. I visited the library. I spoke more with Karen and Maria. I started to feel more alive. David didn't like this change. He said, "You are acting different. You are cold." I said, "I'm just tired. I need some space." He said, "You don't care about me." I stayed quiet. I didn't want to fight, but inside, I knew something had changed. One day, I came home from work and sat down. I was very tired. I didn't make dinner right away. David looked at me and said, "You don't do anything for me anymore." I looked at him and said, "I'm doing my best. I'm tired, David. I work all day. I come home, and I still do everything, but it's never enough for you." He looked surprised. I don't think he expected me to talk like that. I stood up and said, "I don't feel happy anymore. I feel like I'm always walking in fear. I'm always scared of what you will say." He said, "So what now? You want to leave?" I didn't answer right away. I walked into the bedroom. I sat on the bed and closed my eyes. I thought about everything. I thought about my quiet tears. I thought about my lost dreams. I thought about the way I kept trying, even when my heart was tired. I took a deep breath and said to myself, "You don't have to live like this." The next day, I called Maria. I asked her, "Can I stay with you for a few days?" She said, "Yes, of course." When David came home that evening, I was packing a small bag. He asked, "Where are you going?" I said, "I need some time for myself. I need to think." He said, "So you're just walking away?" I said, "I've been here the whole time, David. I've stayed, even when I was hurting. But now, I need to take care of myself." He didn't stop me. He didn't say much. I walked out the door with my bag and didn't look back. At Maria's house, I felt calm. She gave me a warm blanket and made tea. We sat on the sofa, and I told her everything. For the first time, I said the words out loud. "I don't feel safe in my marriage. I don't feel loved." Maria listened. She didn't interrupt. She held my hand and said, "You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You're already enough." I stayed at her place for a few days. I rested. I walked to the nearby park. I saw children playing, dogs running, old people walking slowly in the sun. I sat on a bench and closed my eyes. I felt the wind on my face. It was the first time in months I felt peace. I didn't know what the future would look like, but I knew I could not go back to the life I had before. I didn't want to be afraid every day. I didn't want to keep feeling like I was never good enough. I decided to leave David for good. I found a small room for rent above a bakery. The owner was kind and said I could work a few hours in the shop to help with rent. I said yes. I started a new routine. I woke up early, helped in the bakery, and went for walks after work. I smiled more. I laughed more. I slept better. I also started drawing again. I had an old notebook where I used to sketch. I opened it and began to draw flowers, houses, and smiling people. I even drew a picture of myself, standing under the sun. One evening, Maria visited me. We sat on the floor drinking tea. She looked around my little room and said, "You've made a beautiful space." I said, "It's small, but it's mine. And I feel free here." Sometimes I still think about David. I wonder what he's doing. I wonder if he misses me. But I don't feel sad when I think of him. I feel strong because I left a life that was hurting me. I chose myself. One morning, as I walked to the bakery, a little girl smiled at me and said, "Good morning." I smiled back and said, "Good morning." That small moment made my heart warm. It reminded me that the world is still full of kind people and gentle days. I don't know if I will fall in love again. I don't know if I will get married again. But I do know this: I will never lose myself again. I will not say sorry for who I am. I will not hide my voice. I will not stop dreaming. I may not have everything, but I have peace. I have hope. And I have myself. And now, I truly believe I am not the problem. I never was. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and share. More emotional and inspiring stories are coming soon.